What's up, collective? Happy Friday. Happy Fighter Friday, actually, because today we're going to be talking about mixed martial arts. Yes, again, if you've already heard me talk about this, but today's going to be a little different because I'm going to talk about the evolution of MMA. And I'm going to talk about the last 2 decades because that is how long I've actually been involved in this community. So I wanted to go back 2 decades and tell you kind of where we started, where we're at, and maybe where we're going in the future. So welcome back to the Collective Culture Podcast. I am Nina if you're new. And today this topic is very near and dear to my heart. And over the past 2 decades, MMA has grown from a niche sport misunderstood by the masses to a global phenomena. From rule changes to technique evolution and even shifting public perceptions, I'm going to break it all down in this episode. So, whether you're an MMA fan, trainer, or just a casual viewer, this is going to be a treat for you. So, let's get into it. So, to understand where mixed martial arts is at today, I'm going to take you back, way back to quote unquote where it got started. And for some of you, if you don't know, the early days of MMA, especially during the 90s, was like the Wild West. Back in 1993, the first UFC event was more of an experiment, really. There were no weight classes, very few rules, and fighters from all different kinds of disciplines. We had karate, wrestlers, and even jiu-jitsu artists who came in to prove that their style was superior. It wasn't even called MMA at the time. It was no holds barred fighting. And let me take a moment to paint you a picture here. Imagine Hoist Gracie stepping into the octagon at UFC 1, a relatively small man representing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He went up against fighters much larger than him and still dominated. That event alone introduced many people to the effectiveness of grappling in a real fight scenario. The idea of putting different fighting styles against each other was revolutionary, but with minimal rules, it was chaotic and even brutal. Fighters wore whatever they wanted. Some wore traditional martial arts gis, others wore shoes, and some wore almost nothing at all. You had techniques like groin strikes, hair pulling, and even headbutting was used. While it was fascinating for fans of combat sports, it wasn't exactly TV friendly. And the lack of structure made it hard for the sport to gain widespread acceptance. Even politicians like Senator John McCain famously called it human cockfighting. This label stuck for years and became one of the biggest obstacles to mixed martial arts growth. So let's talk about the rule changes. So, how MMA started to clean up its act and its image and become a legitimate sport by the late 90s and even early 2000s, UFC and other promoters faced criticism for being too violent. And this led to the introduction of the unified rules of MMA in 2001, which was a turning point. So, what exactly changed? Well, first of all, weight classes were introduced, which leveled the playing field. Fighters were no longer mismatched based on size alone. Then, rules like strikes to the back of the head, no groin strikes, and small joint manipulation were implanted. Referees were given more power to step in and protect fighters, and rounds were introduced to prevent marathon like fights with no structure. One of the most notable changes was the introduction of the 10-point must system, borrowed from boxing. This brought a more standardized scoring method, making it easier for fans and judges to understand. Promotions also began requiring fighters to wear gloves, adding another layer of safety while maintaining the sport's integrity. These changes not only protected fighters, but also made the sport more structured and for mainstream audiences. The Athletic Commission started to regulate events, and soon mixed martial arts was no longer just a spectacle, but a true sport. It was also around this time that Zuffa, the new owners of the UFC, began the mission to transform MMA into the global brand that we see today. Now, my little 2 cents and frustration that has still not been resolved is the judging. In the UFC, mostly it is a lot of times very unfair. And I have a lot of friends who fight professionally, and they feel the same way. And hopefully one day we will see a more fair judging system. But I digress. So now let's look at the evolution of techniques. In the early days, most fighters specialized in just one discipline. They were either a striker or a grappler. You had guys like Chuck Liddell representing striking and Hoist Gracie showing the dominance of BJJ, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. But as the sport matured, fighters realized they couldn't rely on just one skill set. The realization gave birth to the modern MMA fighter. Today, the most successful fighters are well rounded. Take GSP, George St. Pierre, for example. He mastered blending striking and wrestling, creating a style that's effective and versatile. Fighters now train in multiple disciplines, including Muay Thai, boxing, wrestling, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and even strength and conditioning. The rise of super gyms like American Top Team and Grud Training Center has created environments where fighters can learn everything under one roof. And just so you guys know, shout out to Grud Training Center in Denver, Colorado. That's my gym. We've also seen the evolution of specific techniques like the leg kick game. It has changed drastically, with fighters like Justin Gaethje, the homie, and Israel Adesanya showing how to use it effectively. And then there's the introduction of spinning and what I call flashy moves, like the spinning back kick and flying knees, which have become crowd pleasers. The ground game has also evolved too, with fighters becoming savants, if you will, in the transitions and escapes. And that's something I want to touch on too, because there's a lot of people who just spectate, they watch UFC fights and, the fight will go to the ground and they'll be grappling, and people, whether they're in the audience or they're at home watching, they tend to get bored and they'll even boo and things like that. And sometimes rightly so because they're not working. But I would say 93.7% of the time they are working. And if you're going to be a spectator, if you're going to be a fan and you really want to understand the sport, I would advise you to not just boo when you think nothing's happening, okay? Because jujitsu, and especially if you're watching in person, it's really hard to see what's going on in the octagon. It's not very good for watching the fights. It's more of an experience. But even if you're watching at home and you can see it better, if you don't understand that they're working, that they are, wrestling, doing jujitsu, trying to find a position, go take a jujitsu class. Most MMA gyms offer your first class for free. So honestly, go try it out. And I'm telling you, your whole perception is going to change on that. All right, so next is the rise of women in mixed martial arts. A huge milestone in the evolution of MMA has been the rise of women in the sport. And when Uncle Dana White, the president of the UFC, said in 2011 that women would never fight in the UFC, people, including me, believed it. But then came Ronda Rousey. Her dominance in the women's bantamweight division shattered stereotypes and proved women's MMA could be just as exciting, if not more, than the men's division. I don't know about all that. I don't know if I would agree with that, but I have so much fun watching fighters like Amanda Nunes. They're really exciting women in the sport to watch as well. And they've taken it to new heights. Women's MMA has expanded the fan base and created role models for young girls worldwide. Promotions like Invicta FC has also played a crucial role in giving female fighters a platform to shine. And I'm very happy to see that because when I first started training back in 2008, there were no women in the sport. And you heard it. I mean, even 2011, Dana White said that no women would ever fight in the promotion. And it was like that for many, many, many years. And, I didn't feel very alone because I adapt well and I find comfort in hanging out with dudes. So it really didn't bother me. It did push me probably a lot harder. And it wasn't until years later, I think it was 2018 actually, was the first time I ever sparred with a female. And I've been training for a long time at that point. 10 years actually, I had been training at that point. So, I mean, it is what it is, but I am glad and very proud to see more females in the sport. So let's go to the evolution of public perception because it's changed dramatically as well over the years. Mixed martial arts went from being seen as barbaric, remember human cockfight, to a respected sport. And a big part of this shift was due to the fighters themselves. Many of them are articulate, disciplined, and embody values like respect and humility. This challenges outdated stereotypes about fighters being meatheads. Although I have to say there are still a lot of meatheads. Not so much in big promotions or champions, but in amateur and people in the gym, there are definitely still meatheads. And what's a meathead? A meathead is somebody who trains to beat people up and they think they're a badass and that's all they do it for. And then, they go around wanting to hit people and shit. That's not cool, man. The first thing in martial arts that you learn is discipline. And I think it's disgusting when people don't have respect for it and they go around trying to fight people. Fight people that don't train. But also, media coverage has played a big role as well in changing the perception. Shows like The Ultimate Fighter brought MMA into people's homes, showcasing not just the fights, but also the stories and struggles of the athletes. And of course, big personalities like Conor McGregor have brought mainstream attention, for better and worse, to the sport. McGregor's charismatic and marketing savvy ways have helped attract a new wave of fans. Even his antics sometimes overshadow the sport itself. He's human and he does fuck up, and I'm not a fan of the dumb shit that he does, but he is um, very talented. I just wish that he would be talented at being mature. And speaking of The Ultimate Fighter, I've actually got to see the behind the scenes of the show being filmed because it was actually filmed in our gym one season. It might have just been one episode or a season. I don't remember. This was a long time ago. And it was really cool to kind of see it being filmed and like set up and all that, setting the stage, if you will. So now let's talk about where MMA is today and maybe where it's headed. So where are we at now? Well, like I said, mixed martial arts is global. The UFC, Bellator, even One Championship, and many other promotions are putting on events all over the world. Fighters are international stars, and MMA gyms are popping up in cities everywhere. Technology has also impacted the sport. We now have advanced analytics to track fighters' performances, wearable tech to monitor health, and even virtual reality tools for training. Social media has given fighters a direct way to connect with their fans, building their personal brands in ways that were not possible 20 years ago. And then looking ahead, I think we're going to see a lot more innovation, perhaps even a new fighting style that may be emerging, and definitely advancement in fighters' safety. The sport is still evolving, and I cannot tell you how excited I am to see what the next 20 years will bring. And something, too, to add to the safety, in the UFC, I'm sure you guys have noticed that their gloves are fingerless, right? So the fingers are exposed. And it has been a battle and challenge for fighters for years in the UFC. And it's caused a lot of damage. I believe that's how Michael Bisping lost his eye, was from a finger gouge from the fingerless gloves. And so it's definitely been something that has been looked at. There's been several designs, um, but we haven't really settled on anything, and it hasn't changed yet. So I hope I get to see that very soon in the future so that we can stop the eye gouging, because it is definitely a problem. But the thing is, guys, it's like, if the fingers aren't exposed, the toes are, so we're going to wear shoes and gloves with fingers, covering them. Like it's one or the other, because we worry about toenails and fingernails, right? They can cut, they're very sharp, and they can essentially make you blind. So, I mean, it is something that you have to look at as a whole, and you can't really just pinpoint on one thing, but it is definitely dangerous, and we need to look more into it in the future. So that's all I wanted to talk about today. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I definitely have enjoyed watching the evolution of mixed martial arts for the last 20 years. It's come a long way. It really has. It's been incredible to witness the transformation firsthand, and in the behind the scenes, and see fighters grow. Like Justin Gaethje. I mean, I seen him when he, was just training at Grudge, and now he's been a champion in the UFC. It's amazing to see this. And also Rose Namajunas, shout out to her. Saw her when she first started training, and now where she's made it in her career, and it's a beautiful thing to witness. And everyone else in the sport, who I've come to grow and love, who I've met in person, those who I haven't. I am just so in love with combat sports. And again, like, if you have this false perception, if you think it's barbaric, if you think it's just cockfighting, go spend some time in a gym. Go make a friend that trains. Look past just a fight. Look at what's led up to a fight. I've talked about this a couple times on my show, on the show. And, I've talked about the struggles that fighters go through, the sacrifices that they make. And I think it's important that people that are just fans and spectators, they understand it to an extent. I mean, obviously you don't have to know everything, unless you want to, but to just have an understanding that's not just based on the fight. What's leading up to it. It's very important and very interesting, actually. Fight camps take around 6 weeks, and it's very grueling, guys, especially if you have to cut weight. It's a lot. It's very taxing on your body, your mental health, the sacrificing time with your family. It's a lot that goes into it. It's not just people show up and they fight. And I want people, and the misconceptions starting to kind of fade away, but there's still people that judge the sport. So I really would invite you to learn more about it. As a matter of fact, I'm going to link the episode where I interview a close friend and a coach of mine who is a fighter. He's actually right now a 3-time bare knuckle boxing championship. He's got like 6 different disciplines under his belt. And bare knuckle boxing is kind of his baby right now. So I'll share that episode with you. And yeah, if you guys have any questions for me, if there are any like topics about mixed martial arts that you want me to go over, dude, I could do a whole podcast on mixed martial arts. I really could, and I may do in the future. We'll see. But really, I want to hear from you guys. Let me know who your favorite fighters are, maybe your favorite fights. One of my all-time favorite fights still to this day, which is probably surprising to a lot of people, is Dan Hardy versus George St. Pierre. I think it was like UFC 99 or 98, 97, one of those. And it still to this day is like one of the fights that stick out to me. I've had the pleasure of meeting both of them. So like, maybe that's why it's 6. I don't think so. No, that's not why. But like, really, it's just one of those fights. Dan Hardy does a move in the fight, and it's like, oh, it's like this big cringy moment that you're like, oh my God, that fucking looks like it hurts. I'm not gonna tell you what it is. You got to go watch it. I'm pretty sure it's on YouTube. I'll leave the clip for that fight if I can find it in the description, or somewhere on social media if I post this somewhere. I'm going to try, you guys. I'm going to try my best to get this on YouTube, this episode, and show you guys some clips. But it's tough in the streets, okay? It's tough in the streets when you don't have patience. when you don't have patience, it's really hard to edit videos. It really is because they just go out the damn window. Your patience go out the window and you just are done. You're just done. You don't have any patience left. So, anyways, I digress. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope it's kind of opened your eyes a little bit if you needed it to. And if you have any questions or if you know any topics that you want me to talk about when it comes to mixed martial arts, let me know. And until next time, ciao.